What's up, guys? We are back with a Masters of the Universe review, and it's time to finally kick off this new Masterverse line correctly. So I've already taken a look at Skelligod, I've already taken a look at Battlecat, because they sort of trickled out earlier than the initial wave since they were at Target, but Walmart has the first wave for a little while. And today we are taking a look at the man himself. We're taking a look at He-Man, because no matter whether I'm interested in this figure the most or not, he has to be first. I really don't know if I could do it any differently. Maybe Skeletor, but it's still He-Man. We gotta do him. So we've got the first figure from the Masters of the Universe Revelation Masterverse. That's such a mouthful. Wave 1, and this guy comes in just a similar but different kind of package from what we've seen otherwise. So it's just a different shape, different form factor. Skelligod's larger, Battlecat is humongous. So we've got him here in what is the standard style packaging for this line, for the standard figures. You've got the figure there in the window, you've got the nameplate down on the bottom. There's a bunch of like Eternian sort of hieroglyphics all over the box. It's got a very blue to black color scheme. Honestly, I find this a little bit boring, but I do really like the artwork on the side panel for He-Man himself. And then you get a larger and different picture of He-Man on the back, along with a bio, and then we also get a cross-sell for the rest of this wave. So I'm not the biggest fan of this packaging style yet, but I do really like this artwork. It's one of those key hallmark Masters of the Universe things, because it's been such a big thing over the years. It's nice to get that again on some retail packaging. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Revelation Masterverse He-Man. So of course, well, maybe not of course, for the uninitiated, let's start there. This guy is the beginning of a brand new line, and this particular figure is of course built upon the framework that we are getting from the new cartoon. So Masters of the Universe Revelation brought into this Masterverse line, whatever this line happens to end up being, because we still don't really know the full scope. To me, that really makes it sound like we could be pulling from things that aren't just Revelation. That's of course conjecture on my part, because I don't think we know that, but it sure sounds like it, which I'm up for that. This figure is, again, 100% new. This is the most articulated He-Man we've ever gotten from Mattel, and he is interesting. There is some stuff I like about this figure, and there's some stuff that I don't like about this figure. I am, however, going to say right off the bat that this is not replacing or even coming close to taking away my love for classics. So it's not one of those things for me. I'm not really going to compare the two too much. I love classics, but I'm going to give this figure a fair shake. So let's see what this guy can do, see how he moves around, because he is, again, he's all new, and this is an entirely different kind of He-Man, a much more articulated He-Man as well, because of course classics had its limitations. So let's move this guy around. So we've got a head that can look up slightly. Honestly, I wish it could look up a little more, but it's enough because of how he's sculpted to get him sort of looking upwards and aloft. You can look down really good. You've got some tilt side to side, not too much, but a little bit to give him some attitude. You've got your rotation there. Arms go out at the shoulders. They, of course, rotate. We don't have a butterfly joint or anything like that on this figure. You've got bicep swivel. We've got double jointed elbows, and they are pinless, which is not really a big concern when it comes to stuff right now when it comes to Masters. But of course, you know, that is the big thing with a lot of toys these days, with a lot of figures, and of course I really like it. So aesthetically, it's pretty pleasing. And then you've got hinges and rotation at the wrist. He does have lateral hinges. They're not vertical, which I wish they were vertical, especially his right for the sword. We've got our ab torso articulation. It's a diaphragm cut, so he goes backwards just a little bit. Any further and you're going to start to see the gap in there. He goes forward just a little bit. You've got good tilt side to side, and then that's also a rotating piece. You've got a waist twist down here, but it's not any kind of hinge or ball peg. It's just a twist. I wish it was a ball peg. It would have helped him lurch forward a little bit more, but of course he is still pretty well articulated there. Legs go out really far. They kick forward all the way. He does have a rubbery, furry loincloth, so that is going to hinder you a little bit. You'll just have to work around it. He goes backward a good bit, probably more than you need. You've got your thigh cut there. We've got double jointed knees. pinless as well. And then you've got boot cut, you've got rocker, and you've got really good hinges down at those ankles. So he is very well articulated. I mean, super articulated is a way to describe this figure just because of the fact that he is much more articulated than classics, more in line with, say, you know, at least for my experience, more in line with a Marvel Legends figure, and he is going to be able to be put into some pretty solid dynamic poses without too much fuss, I'm going to say. Where I think it's going to be kind of the make or break area for this figure is it's the aesthetics. It's obviously going to be the aesthetics because, well, it's He-Man. It's obviously He-Man. Well, you couldn't look at this and think otherwise. It's quite clearly a version of He-Man. But there are some things about this particular figure that I think kind of skew him in the wrong direction. Overall, and kind of overwhelmingly so, I think this is a pretty solid figure. But there are a couple things in particular that, while they may seem small, they just kind of don't do it for me, basically. So to start with, I think the overall body is relatively okay as far as size and just overall build. He's a beefy, big, tall figure, and we'll do size comparisons because, of course, he is a large figure. These definitely scale a little bit larger than, you know, an average figure, Black Series, Marvel Legends, stuff like that. But I think the overall sculpt of the figure is good. The loincloth is good. I do like, of course, that we kept the asymmetrical armor design, so he's got the longer gauntlet versus just having a bracer on one side. There is a decided lack of paint on this guy, though, in many areas. He's mostly, I mean, at least as far as his body goes, there's really not any paint on him. And what that really comes down to is that there is an odd finish difference here between this figure. So the arms and the legs are relatively smooth, and they're just sort of, well, they're fleshy arms. They've got kind of a matte finish to them, but the torso is glossy. And it has this really weird texture on it, and it catches the light, especially, I mean, you can see it right now with my lights kind of pounding down on him. But the torso is kind of like pitted almost, really, really finely, and you can actually feel it. Like there's definitely a texture all over the body, and it's odd. It makes him look oily, but only on his chest, and it's kind of weird. Like he's super sweaty almost, but it's not consistent across the figure. So it's really odd in that regard. I think the torso is sculpted well, but I'm really curious about what's going on with that. It's really odd. Like it has a different color tone because of that in some ways, and then it also just has this sort of like different finish. There is a slight bit of shading on this figure, but for the most part it's kind of like a naked man, so I'm not really concerned about that kind of stuff too much. The boots are nicely done, although they do look a tad long. This is a very leggy He-Man. He's very, very much long in the legs, but I think the sculpt on the boots is really nice. The furry cuffs of the boots are good. The loincloth is nicely done. It's kind of on the big side, but I guess that's mostly just because the figure is so big. It seems a little bit larger than it should be. And then you've got the chest armor, which is very classic. Of course, we have an H on the chest and not like the Iron Cross anymore, which, you know, your mileage may vary on whether you truly care about that. I don't. We've seen the H before in other instances with He-Man, so it's something that exists, and I'm perfectly fine with it being here. The red is nicely done, and of course it's the classic gray. There is nothing on the back to hold the sword, because we definitely see in the trailer that he just throws it right in there. So this is screen accurate, which I actually do really like. And then we get the head sculpt, and this is where I think a lot of folks have kind of an issue with this figure, and it's going to be myself included, because it's just kind of odd. It seems small. Even in hand, it still seems small to me. I just don't think the head looks like it's sized right. I do think that for the most part, it's decently done, but there's also something about this expression that doesn't exactly look right with me either. He looks kind of stoic while also being kind of happy, which isn't an odd thing for a He-Man figure, but at the same time, I'd kind of like him just with, you know, like a regular kind of tough look on his face. I do believe we are going to get that kind of head when we get the deluxe faker that we've seen is coming, but of course I'd rather it be in the box. And then there is some really haphazard shading all in the hair. It's kind of heavy-handed in some areas where there's just like some straight black, where the wash is just sort of pooled up down at the bottom of the hair sculpt. The eyes are really clean and crisp. I don't believe this is any kind of photo printing that I I can tell. It doesn't really look like it anyway. I could be wrong, but the eyebrows are straight and clean. I just don't know that I'm sold on this head sculpt. It's an interesting situation when, after having all of these figures in hand, He-Man is probably my least favorite of the bunch. I think the body is really well done, except for whatever's going on with the overall, I don't know, texture on the torso. I think the sculpt looks really nice, and it's obviously a He-Man. It's very He-Man-esque, but there's also something about the head sculpt that is, I don't know, it's just kind of off. It just seems too small. And then here is our size comparison. So we're going to do just a couple He-Men because I'm not going to go the Pixel Dan route and just blast you with He-Man figures. We're going to go with our current other line, Origins, to give you an idea of what he looks like next to the other line that's going to be running alongside it on the shelves. And then our most recent He-Man line beyond that, so classics. And there's not a lot to compare to in some ways. I mean, the big thing is, of course, size. Origins is a vintage style size figure, so of course it's going to be much smaller. The big thing is classics. And again, this is not replacing classics for me by any stretch of the imagination. It can't even begin to touch it. But it's interesting just how different these things are when it comes to getting them stacked right next to each other. Classic still is a huge figure, but he is quite small in some ways by comparison. It looks a lot bigger here than it is, but the Revelation figure is slightly taller, and his proportions are a little bit more exaggerated. Like I said, he's a leggy He-Man, but the Classics figure is a much broader, beefier figure, maybe more in line with what you would expect He-Man to actually be. So you've got a lot of differences here. They really don't match up in any way, shape, or form, and I don't think there's any intention to either. It's just interesting to see how they stack up next to each other. So a figure that, I mean, for the longest time has been like the big He-Man is suddenly a little bit shorter than it seems when you've got him next to this new line. They definitely are an entirely different scale and style of figure. And then let's change it up a little bit, licenses, styles of figure. So we'll move He-Man, well, one of them aside, and put him up next to a NECA Turtle. So this is the Donnie from the Disguise pack. And then here is a Black Series, so we'll move He-Man again. And here is the most recent deluxe Boba Fett from Return of the Jedi. So you can see how he stacks up next to a normal 6-inch figure, and then, you know, NECA Turtles are in that 5.5-ish inch range, and I mean, he absolutely towers over them. And then here he is with a Mythic Legion, because why not? So a Colosseum Orc, and he is more along the same lines, but he's still a little bit shorter, just a tad. And then let's do another Hasbro. We'll do a Snake Eyes for another 6-inch style figure. And then just for maybe another different kind of scale, here he is with a reaction figure in front of him. And you can see our 3 3/4 inch figure does not even come up to the yellow part of the belt, the loincloth area. He is just absolutely towering over figures. This is an entirely different kind of figure. It's really surprising just how big these are until you get them in your hand and you realize that Mattel is really going for something a little bit different with this series. And then as far as accessories goes, I would say that He-Man has, I don't know, all the stuff that you would kind of expect a He-Man figure to have, at least as far as a more cartoon He-Man. Because, you know, the axe isn't necessarily a cartoon thing. So we, of course, get some hands to start with, because he doesn't have any gripping hands right here, right now. So you do get a set of gripping hands, which is interesting. You know, it's not the most common thing to get this style of He-Man figure with extra hands. You know, that's not exactly something we got tons of in Classics, really, right? So that's cool. I do like that. We get the shield, which is a very classic shield. You've got your silvery gray plastic with the orange accents, and the paint is okay. It's a little splotchy. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but it's not going to ruin my day. And then we do get the Power Sword, which of course is a new design for the show. This is, like I expected, the exact same sword that Skelegod comes with, although the paint applications are a little different. The wrap on the handle is a darker brown here than Skelegod's. So this is Skelegod's. It's a slightly lighter brown. I mean, that doesn't matter at all. But otherwise, these are the same, which was kind of my expectation, that this is why the sword looks so small with him is because it's the same sword that He-Man comes with. So you've got this, and then of course, like I said, you can do what he does in that trailer and just sort of throw it in his back right there, and then he is ready to go. And I do really like him with the sword in the back. I think it looks fantastic. It's a very classic look for He-Man, and honestly, having him with that kind of sheath back there makes him look a little cooler to me as well. So he doesn't come with a ton of stuff. He's certainly not the most stacked figure when it comes to this wave, but he comes with all the hallmarks. You get the sword, you get the shield, and then of course you get some extra hands, which just round him out a little bit more, because I do like having the options of all these hands, and that's one thing that's really different and pretty exciting about this line, is that they all seem to have an array of extra hands. And of course, He-Man gets a fist, he gets an open palm hand, which of course is going to be useful for the shield, and then you get those two gripping hands. So overall, this is a solid figure, but definitely one that has some oddities to him. I think my biggest criticisms overall are the torso, because I frankly don't understand what's going on with all that texture and why he has a different finish and different feel than the rest of the body. It seems odd. I just don't understand the thought process behind it. And then of course the head sculpt. I'm not sold on the expression, and I'm also not sold on the size. I still think the head looks a little small. I am very much on board with this kind of He-Man figure, though. I like the idea that we're getting a more articulated, much more modern He-Man action figure, while still retaining a lot of the classic hallmark He-Man designs. I mean, it's undoubtedly a He-Man figure. You can't dispute that. It's just based on an updated, newer style design, and he also comes with a small but pretty solid array of accessories. So that's going to do it for this look at the Masters of the Universe Revelation Masterverse He-Man. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.